Welcome, welcome. My name is Amanda Miller, and I'm the Associate Director for the National Consortium for Data Science, also known as NCDS. It is my pleasure to welcome you to the virtual NCDS Spring Career Panel, Analyzing Data Science Careers. It is our pleasure to introduce today's career panel with this in mind. And this is a hard one, guys. You are here now. Please resist the urge to multitask. Your curiosity about the educational and career paths of our panelists will serve you well in the next hour. Continue to gather the information and gather the data, if you will. Listen to these subject matter experts to discover actionable insights for your own professional journey. Um, and before we do that, we do have a few housekeeping items. I'm just going to cover these very quickly. We have disabled the Zoom Q&A for attendees. All questions related to the panel should be uploaded to Easy Retro, which is our crowdsourcing Q&A platform. My colleague will share the link in the Zoom chat now with all of you, and we will share instructions and the link once again during our Q&A portion. We love Easy Retro because we find it fairly easy to use. So please feel free to add questions and comments as they arise during the event. You don't have to wait for us to give you permission. We will leave about 20 minutes at the end of our time together for audience Q&A. If we don't get to your question, we'll do our best to address that in our takeaway materials, our wrap-up materials at the end of this week. When we do finish this evening, we'll invite you to share feedback on the event. Please take a moment to tell us how to improve and what content interests you most. And finally, we'll provide announcements about upcoming programs with NCDS. So with all of these things out of the way, I'm going to go ahead and hand this event over to Sarah Egan Warren, our panel moderator. Sarah is a teaching assistant professor at Institute for Advanced Analytics at North Carolina State University. Sarah, we are super happy that you're going to be steering our conversations this evening. So thanks so much for being here, and I'm going to let you take it away.
Thank you, Amanda, and thank you for inviting me. I appreciate it, and I'm very excited for all of you out there to get to know our wonderful panelists today. I teach ethical data storytelling to my graduate students, and we are in the process of them looking for jobs, and I know that some of them are here tonight as well. So I'm excited for them to get to know you and for everyone who's joined us tonight. We're going to start off with panelist introductions, and I'm going to ask each of you to tell your name and title and employer information and a little fun information as well. Tell us what you wanted to do for a living when you were 10 years old. And then let's think about what you're doing right now. We're going to kick it off with Miriam. Can you start us off, please?
Hi, thanks so much for having me. My name is Miriam Farouk, and I run the New York Artificial Intelligence community. When I was 10, I wanted to be an Olympic gold medalist figure skater. That didn't pan out. Now I'm a founder, operator, AI community builder, and speaker. NYAI is a global community of over 12,000 builders, founders, and investors, and we're focused on events, education, and upskilling.
Wonderful. And I know you are a New York City-based person, but you are actually in Mexico right now, right?
Yes, working remotely in Mexico for the month, so
Yeah,
had to get some sunshine.
that's wonderful. Thanks. We're glad you're here. Sean, how about you? And Sean, you're on mute still.
Of course, the classic mute button. Love
Yes.
it. Well, hey everyone. I'm really happy to be here. It's a pleasure. My name is Sean Mobley. I am a security architect at SAS. I'm also a U.S. Army Reserve officer. What I wanted to do when I was 10 years old, I wanted to be a pilot or an astronaut or a musician or a chef. Um, Most of that hasn't panned out, but I do DJ every so often at work and in my free time, so that's cool. And I'm actually getting ready to get my pilot's license this year, a private pilot's license.
That's wonderful. Congratulations. That's really exciting. Thanks for being here, Sean.
Thank you.
And Tiffany, your turn.
Having me as well. So my name is Tiffany Callahan. I'm a senior machine learning researcher starting a new job actually next week at Sandbox AQ, most recently at IBM Research. When I was younger, I was convinced that I would make the world's best firefighter. And instead, what I find myself doing now is putting out all kinds of other fires related to data and research. So still get some of those skills of handling stressful situations, not nearly as extreme, of course, but very different trajectory.
It's good. Metaphorical fires. Tiffany, I'm having a little bit of problem with your sound, maybe your microphone. If you could just check that for,
Yeah, let me check that really quickly. Sorry
yeah.
about that.
While you're doing that, we're going to move on to our sort of background questions and thinking about your own academic journey of how you got from school to where you are right now. So, can you tell us a little bit about what you studied? How did you make the decision to pursue that specific degree? And just kind of give us an idea about your academics that got you to where you are today. Miriam, we'll start off with you again.
Sure, thank you. So I got my bachelor's degree at UNC Chapel Hill in economics. So North Carolina strong.
Yes.
Um, and I decided to study economics. I had read a couple books in high school. One was The End of Poverty by Jeffrey Sachs. I read a couple books by Muhammad Yunus. I was really interested in the kind of development side internationally. I wanted to go to the Peace Corps. Economics was great because it gave me a really solid foundation in critical thinking, complex systems, and some very light data analysis. The Peace Corps didn't work out. I had gotten accepted and then didn't pass the physical, had to have emergency surgery. Life
Oh,
doesn't pan out the way you think it will sometimes, but sometimes that's the universe pointing you in the right direction.
nice. That's a great way to think about it, isn't it? Right, thanks. Sean, how about you? Tell us about your journey.
Sure. So my journey, I think it started in elementary school. I remember this one time sitting at the kitchen table doing math homework, and my uncle was tutoring me. We're actually going through, I think it was binary. So I was really bad at math at that point, so I really needed all the help. But for some reason, he told me about, hey, this binary stuff. This is one of the foundational things that computers do. And so I'm also at the time I was an avid video gamer, and my uncle was as well. So he kind of connected the dots. Hey, these video games, it's a lot of ones and zeros, lots of programming. Um, it's kind of neat. You should maybe look into that. Maybe you should look into computer science. So for some reason, I set my goal on, you know what, I'm going to study computer science. So throughout high school, I really haven't had any questions about it. And I started actually dabbling in HTML and some other programming. I remember there was a state fair where they had a computer where you could just type in questions and answers, and I think it was Visual Basic or Pascal or something. And I just then knew, hey, computer science is something I want to look into. So after graduating high school, I actually went to a community college because I figured, hey, just knock out the general requirements. And then I transferred to a 4-year school where I could then really focus on computer science. And it was great because I went to a school where the student teacher ratio was pretty good. So our students could ask the teachers lots of questions. We also had research programs. And so when I got to studying the different courses of the computer science discipline, tied that with the undergraduate research, I really knew, okay, this is for me. And I had no questions about it. I knew that my graduate degree was also going to be related either to information technology or computer science. And I did end up getting a master's in computer science.
Yeah. Does your uncle know that he played such an important role in how your career path has turned out?
You know, he does not know. I think I should give him a life update.
Yeah.
Like, hey,
Yeah, absolutely. I bet you he'd really love hearing that. That's really nice. Thank you
yeah.
for sharing. Tiffany, I know where you started is not where you ended up with your academics. Tell us your path.
Yes, absolutely. So I actually went to undergrad on an athletic scholarship for skiing. And during that between trying to balance what the strict criteria for the minimum grade point average you could have while still be on the ski team and balance what I wanted, that's something that still felt meaningful. I ended up going for a psychology degree, and at the institution I went to, they had the option to specialize in like statistical psychology, which I thought was really interesting because it wasn't just how do we do studies, how do we work with people, how do we understand how to change behavior, but how do we also learn the statistics and the methods that we need to study whether or not we're being effective at changing behavior. So I pursued that and dove really heavily into undergraduate research opportunities. So at my institution, there was a lot of things you could volunteer for, and I tried everything from developmental psychology studies to working with juvenile delinquents to try to help establish interventions for behavior change. And that's what I ended up sticking with because it was very, very tough, but also very rewarding. Through that, figured out that, okay, I like the people aspect, but people are really hard, both to track down for studies and to change their behavior. So it was about more of the data aspect for me that it really kept me intrigued of, oh man, we have all these different modalities. We have behavioral questionnaires, we put people in MRI scans, and we have all kinds of other bits and pieces of information. How do we best put this into a model, or how do we best ask questions about this data? And more importantly, how do we know if the question we ask can be answered by the data we have? So I then got a master's in statistics, specifically through a public health program, because I wanted more of an applied experience, and worked really hard to learn more about data, more about study design. It took a lot of math, which was fun, but I'm not going to lie, math is, no matter how much math I've taken, I still find math to be challenging in a good way. So if math is hard for you, you're not alone, and you can still do it for all kinds of fun research. And through that, realize, okay, now I understand the data and I love it, but I need more computational skills to really ask and answer the kinds of questions I'm interested in. So I pursued a PhD in computational bioscience or biology, which really just means lots of computer science classes paired with opportunities to apply the skills you learn in computer science to biological questions. So working with genomic data and all different kinds of omic data, as well as person level data from clinical records and hospitals. And that led me sort of to where I am now, although I'm not working with healthcare data or clinical data specifically, more in material sciences, but that skill set of pivoting from psychology, then pivoting to statistics, then pivoting to biology and computer science really helped me now know that, okay, there's going to be a learning gap. I definitely will not know how to do everything, but I know that I have the skills to figure out how to get to where I'm going, and just being patient and kind to myself in the process. Sorry if that's a too long-winded of an answer.
No, that was great. And I loved what you just said about that growth mindset of you're pivoting, you're taking skills that you had from other experiences and bringing them with you to the next one, and knowing that when there is that knowledge gap, that you can build that bridge over it and learn it. That's wonderful. Let's stick with you for just a little bit longer here. And can you talk a little bit about the role of data science in your work, and like what tools do you use? What are the top skills that you would recommend that students really focus on?
Absolutely. And if you see me looking down, it's because I took some notes on this particular question. I want to make sure I don't miss anything.
Absolutely.
I'd say in my most recent role, the role of data science in a day-to-day setting kind of has three different sort of things that one might do, at least for me. And that's running quick analyses for either someone in my group or a quick question for someone like my manager who wants to know, okay, we have these data, we'd like to know if there's been any change in X. So can you do that really quick? The second part is getting to learn how to play more of a leadership role on small studies, and then sort of combining and pitching into larger study development. So project planning. So what's the goal that we're trying to achieve? What data do we have to answer it? Who are our stakeholders, or who are the people that we're trying to come up with some sort of application or answer for? So planning, quick analyses, and then the last one is my individual projects. So working either one-on-one or with other collaborators to complete a big goal. And usually these projects for me have taken 3 to 9 months, maybe a year to complete. And I may have 1 or 2 of those overlapping depending on what the objectives are. So those are the primary roles of what data science looks like for me. The tools I use, and I've tried to think about buckets, so we can go into any more specifics if there's specific questions. I would say sort of parallel distributed computing, whether on a server or on a cloud, is a really big skill and tool I use all the time. Programming, and in my case, they want us to use Python, so I use a lot of Python coding, both writing scripts and applications to run from the command line, but also using things like Jupyter Notebooks. And then my favorite tool and sort of what I would call my Bible is there's an O'Reilly book called the Machine Learning Handbook, or Handbook for Machine Learning. And that book is amazing because it takes you from the theory and the math, but also includes coding examples. And we can't keep all of these machine learning algorithms in our head, or be an expert at every single one, like at least like I'd like to be every time. So having this desk reference that I buy every edition and I've highlighted and put sticky notes on all the pages that I found important is a huge resource that I go back to. And then I think you said, what are the most important skills? And that sort of ties back up to it. So I'll be brief.
You're doing great.
Coding is I would say, is the modern data science currency. If you can code, there are not a lot of hurdles that you'll find that you can't get through. Similarly, math, but I don't think you have to be a math expert or have a degree in math. I think you just need to feel comfortable that you can dig deeper if you need to, or know who to go ask if you get stuck on something. And then I would say data wrangling, but in the bigger pipeline of know how to plan a study, run the study, build the code, and then evaluate the resulting answer of that study. So if you build a model, how do you know that it works for more than just the examples you trained and tested it on? Will it be generalizable to a broader set of data? And then the most important one, networking. Definitely having a network you can rely on and the ability to continue to expand it and feel comfortable. Sometimes I cold call people that I found on LinkedIn because I think they have expertise I need, and having that email draft that I can consistently go back to know, okay, this is professional. Hopefully they'll write back to me. And if not, that's okay. But they usually do.
Nice. That was excellent. Thank you so much for sharing. That was really helpful. And the nugget really that I want to pull out from that and amplify just a bit is know who to ask. That's wonderful. We can't know everything. And having our connections, our network, and knowing how to ask and who to ask is so important. So thank you for sharing all of that.
Yeah, and who doesn't like being asked questions? So you'll never upset anyone for asking.
That's right. People like to help other people, right? Sean, how about you? Would you add anything? Can you talk about the tools that you use, the skills that you're using?
I think Tiffany definitely hit the nail on the head. I think that's how you say it, right?
Yes, yeah.
Programming, or knowing how to write certain lines of code, or being familiar with certain languages and frameworks, at least in data science, if you're on that level of, let's say writing models or cleaning data and such things, definitely super important. Definitely, you should look into those hard skills. But there are also some other skills that Tiffany mentioned that are, more sort of soft skills that are definitely going to come into play. They might not come into play when you're, at the beginning of your career, but it's definitely very helpful when you start developing those soft skills. I am an introvert. I learned over time to be a bit more outgoing and, talking to people and networking. And so that's definitely a thing. I think that's something that's important to develop early on is, how do you network? What are kind of the steps or the phases you can take? What are some easy icebreakers, right? When you're in a new environment or you're in a new team, what can you do to start building relationships or building rapport, right? That's going to become super important as you start your career, but then also you start building your career. Because at some point there might be a situation where you're no longer, let's say, an individual contributor. You're starting to be a leader. You might be a thought leader. You might be leading teams. And when you get into that position, it's definitely about relationships, knowing how to communicate. But also, I think what's going to be super important in these technical fields is, especially with data and complex systems, right, and all these interconnections, how can you take those complex situations or complex scenarios, and how can you communicate it to everyone in the room. So you might, so at some point you might be in a room with technical people and people that are not technical, or not at all technical. It might be just project managers or some leadership positions in the room, and you want to be able to communicate the problem and the solution to everyone in the room. Because when you do that, then you can find agreements and collaborations to solve problems. And so I think that's a good soft skill to have, is knowing how to build relationships, communicating complex things in a simple way so that everyone can understand and help solve the problem.
Oh, Sean, you are speaking my language. That's exactly what I work with students on, is to be able to make that connection between whether you're a very technical person or more a business person. Being able to explain is the key. That is the key. So thank you. And I want you to think about what kind of easy icebreakers that you've used. I don't want to put you on the spot. Like, think about it for a moment, and we're going to go to Miriam. I'm going to come back to you because I bet you people would appreciate hearing one icebreaker that they could try for networking. So think about it for a bit. Miriam, what would you add to this conversation about tools and skills?
Yeah, these are all great answers. Definitely echoing in the networking side, the communication side, and project management. Those are
Mm,
just core skills that you'll have to use throughout any project you do. I personally come from the business side, not the technical side. So I am going to raise my hand and vote for kind of sales and business strategy and
mhm,
product. Really kind of understanding who you're selling to, who the user is, kind of echoing what Tiffany was saying about really understanding the different stakeholders. And then I think I'll take a bit of a curve here. I also find it really helpful when new hires have a baseline understanding of some of the different tools and platforms that we might
mhm,
use in business, whether it's knowledge management platforms like Google Drive or Notion, comms tools like Slack or Discord, project management like Asana or Trello. Notion has the Kanban features as
mhm,
well, design tools like Canva. And now, with the rise of these large language models and this kind of democratized access to AI, play around with these tools. You ChatGPT, Claude, Perplexity, they're all good for different things. So you working on different projects and really figuring out what is the best tool for each use case is going to be a big skill in and of itself.
Yeah, I was wondering how long it was going to take for AI to be mentioned today. So we got 24 minutes in, and I want to encourage that conversation to keep going for sure. Um, Sean, did you come up with one of your favorite icebreakers?
Man, I've been in meetings where we start off the meeting with icebreakers, and I really can't think of one.
No, they're
But
all gone.
there's one that might be controversial, and
Okay.
it's more of a questionnaire of, it's maybe like a vote or something, is like, hey, what's better, waffles or pancakes?
Oh, yes.
You know,
Yeah.
or something like that. I mean, even an icebreaker we had at the beginning of this meeting. Hey,
Hmm.
what did you think you're wanted to do when you're 10 years old? I mean, that's a great icebreaker.
Hmm. Great. Well,
But
thank
I
you.
did want to add
Oh,
something to Miriam's feedback or answers. And we're in a time and place where it's great that we can innovate and produce all these great platforms and products and software. But we're now at a point where we do have to start thinking about the ethics behind everything, right?
hmm.
And so I think that is important skill to build now. And if you have any courses in your curriculum that can kind of start building your awareness around AI ethics, or really ethical use of technology in general, I think that would be great to have. Because as you start maybe developing or working on a product, it's very easy to look at, hey, what can I do to start generating value for this product? What can I do? What features can I incorporate? But then you also really have to think about, well, what could go wrong with my product?
Hmm.
What could go wrong with my tool? What could go wrong with my platform? And if you can start thinking about those things, even as you're completing your degree, what could go wrong with just me writing this code right here, this little AI model? that I think that's going to be very impactful going forward.
And Sean, I loved you brought that up, that idea of what can go wrong, but also what are the downstream consequences? And using, Miriam mentioned at the very beginning, critical thinking, using those
Mhm.
critical thinking skills while you're getting into a project to consider not just immediately what could go wrong, but what populations might be impacted, what could this look like in the hands of somebody else? That's a great thing to have brought up for us today too. Thank you very much for talking about that. Anyone else want to add that until before we move into a little bit about some direct advice? Okay. So let's talk about some advice. There may be some people who are pursuing either liberal arts degrees or degrees that don't seem like they are just a direct stomping ground straight toward data science. What is some advice on how to combine interest in fields outside of data science? Miriam, can you share some ideas for that?
Yeah, definitely. Well, first of all, you are my people, the ones that are coming from the non-technical side. You don't have to be building these complex systems to be in the world of AI. AI is going to end up overlapping with any and every industry that has data, so pretty much every industry. Yeah, as I mentioned before, if you're not working on the technical pieces, you're left with kind of the sales side, how to sell it, marketing, how to position it, what you're doing, how to raise awareness about it, the product side, understanding your users' needs and using these user interviews and data to continuously improve the product or develop new product lines. And then really deep domain knowledge of certain fields will continue to be important. The more domain expertise that you have, I think the more competitive you'll be.
Mhm. Nice, that's great. Sean, can you give us two things that applicants can do right now to really start positioning themselves to stand out when they're going through their job search?
Yeah, I think so. I think one thing you can do is being able to connect whatever passions you might have or hobbies um, to your degree, or if you're wanting to be in data science or a technology field, yeah, how can you tie those two together? Is there maybe a problem within your community or your neighborhood that maybe you can solve with technology, or just by looking at the data if the data is available? And then another thing you can then do then is, well, maybe you have to upskill a little to be able to carry out your project, but that's going to help you tell a story, right? So the story starts where, okay, hey, I have this problem. There's something I can do to help my community or my neighborhood, but I need to acquire these skills. Well, once you've acquired the skills, you then might be able to also explain the problem within that domain, and then you can go through how you solve that problem. And I think that in itself is going to make you stand out because you saw something where you needed to build awareness or education or knowledge around the problem. You then acquired that knowledge and then you applied technology and knowledge to solve a problem. I think that's very valuable for getting into industry or any industry. And I think it's going to look good in a job interview.
Mhm. And your excitement and passion are going to show up, right? If you're excited talking about
Yep.
something, it's contagious, right? No one it wants to listen to you. Yeah, I did this project. We don't want boring. We want that excitement, and we can feel that when it's real.
That's right.
So Tiffany, let's round out this advice. Thinking about some skills that you've developed for yourself in the past few years, what have you been most proud of? What is something that you feel like really strongly that you've been able to develop lately?
Great question. So for my most recent position, I had to be able to develop models in the biophysics space.
Mhm.
And having most recently, or the last time I took let's see, a biology or a physics class, because we didn't really take them in my PhD, was probably in undergrad. So it was a very long time between. So the grasping how to understand those complicated concepts, and in particular working with a 3 and 4D data types I was working with, was very, I don't think in 3D, that was very hard for me. So I feel very proud to feel good about not only understanding it, but understanding it enough to build code around manipulating these data and modeling them. I think But honestly, the most important thing that I'm most proud of is learning how to communicate to similarly technical skilled people, to domain experts who are experts in their area, but maybe it's not technical in the same sense. So they physicists, biologists, MDs who are working on clinical projects with, to not lose the passion and the drive and the trust when talking to different kinds of collaborators has been something I've valued. And most recently, to walk into a room with a bunch of executives and know, okay, they don't really care about all the technical shenanigans. They want to know about cost, how hard is it to do, and when can it be done by. And but again, you don't want to lose the passion, because people build off of your excitement. So figuring out how to say, okay, it's going to take this many hours to compute to someone, and then to someone else say, but it's going to be great because we can expose all this new functionality to clients that they never had before, and I'm excited about it, has been something that I've worked really hard on and I'm very proud of.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Working on those skills is something that everyone can do, right? We can practice every day getting better and better at this, even if it feels awkward at first, even if you're not great at it, building up, and the more experiences you have, the easier it's going to be, for sure.
Absolutely. And I practice with my family, like when I go home from Christmas. If I can talk about a project and my dad is not falling asleep in his chair, then I've done a good job.
That's nice. That's a great way to test that. That's really great. Okay, I want to make sure that we're doing great on time. Let's talk a little bit about your graduate school backgrounds, right? So all three of you have advanced degrees. We've got a PhD, we got an MBA, we got a Master of Science. How'd you go about choosing your graduate program? Tiffany, since we're with you, let's start with you. You talked to us about your process, like how you got there, but how did you choose your program?
Great question. I leaned very heavily on mentors and I would say mentors at the time. So during undergrad, when I was doing research, I became very close with the PI, or the principal investigator, or the professor who was running that research, and some of her postdocs. And so being able to say, I want to do this, here are some options. Can you talk through the pros and cons of these with me based on your expertise? Was very valuable. And I actually ended up doing the exact same thing for choosing the PhD program. And I think the biggest thing I could recommend there is talk to everyone that you think could give you good advice, and then apply to as many places as you can afford. And luckily that's becoming a lot better and easier to do nowadays. It's not as big of a barrier to entry to apply to places, but if especially for a PhD, they take it very seriously. You'll get flown out. You'll get to meet all the current students and all the professors. And when you are about to give up 4 to 6 years of your life doing only one thing, you really need to understand, are the current students happy? What are the most recent graduates doing in terms of jobs? Did they struggle to find those jobs? Are the professors really invested in not only what you learn in terms of your skill set, but also in your mental health? Because you cannot work 24 hours a day every day, and some people will want that from you. And so I think that those were the main things for me, is really find good mentors you trust, and then set up a system where you can get as much information as possible. So actually going to as many interviews, asking to speak to graduate students, because you just won't know until you get there. And hopefully most students, having also been on the other side of this table, I will tell people very honestly about my experience, and because I don't want anyone to suffer unduly because someone wasn't transparent with them. So feeling good enough to ask those questions is important.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks for bringing up mentoring. And I know that that is such an important part of all of this. And we keep touching on this idea of our network, our connections, and you're just re-emphasizing over and over again how important that absolutely is. And I hope everyone is taking that to heart. For those of you who feel awkward about mentoring, or sorry, about networking, or awkward about asking someone to be a mentor, it is absolutely worth it. So Sean, can you tell us a little bit about how you picked your program?
Sure. For me, actually, it wasn't super elaborate. I think I was approaching it from a practical standpoint. I was really interested in, well, what's my return on investment going to be? And maybe that's not how you should be looking at it, but I knew I didn't want to spend a lot of money on higher education. I know some institutions now, it's more affordable. But I know when I applied to Georgia Tech, I knew the price point was pretty good, but also it was is basically the first massively online degree or program. And so that something about that appealed to me, especially with AT&T was in the mix initially when that program came off the ground.
Mm-hmm.
But I actually started out at NC State, and it's actually kind of interesting because it is a bit of a failure story, if we'll get into that. But I
Mm-hmm.
started out at NC State, and I was working at the time, so working full time. I knew I wanted to pursue higher education, but you had to really, I had to really pick how to accomplish that. And so I looked at the online program back in the day. It was through continuing education program. It might have changed now, but yeah, it was NC State online, and it was NC State, right? Wow, who wouldn't want to go to NC State for computer science? So that was my first choice. And then I wasn't so successful with their program because I was working full time, my first
Mm-hmm.
job, and being an adult, I want to do other things other than just study. So a couple of years later, I finally decided to apply to a few other institutions. Johns Hopkins was one, and then I finally decided on Georgia Tech just because I read good things about them. I looked at the reviews for the courses, but I saw the price point, and the price point was really affordable. $800 for a semester. That's not bad. So I was like, why not? Let's give it a try.
Nice. Uh, I think Miriam, you also have a failure story that you'd like to share.
Yeah, yeah. And also, I never actually did a graduate degree, despite looking into options every year whenever I was frustrated at a project. I think traditional colleges are great, but I just feel like AI is moving at such a breakneck pace that it's kind of hard to kind of corporatize that into a real college curriculum before the next th a new thing comes up. Like models are being released every other day. And certification programs are definitely an option as well, but theory will only get you so far without practice. So going back to what Sean was saying about projects, really the most competitive applicants I see are the ones working on these real projects. You could do a Kaggle competition or something, but those are mostly predictive problems with very clean data sets. So finding some real project with something that's messy or even joining some larger open source effort could be a great way to do that. And while I didn't get a graduate degree, I do consider me going through an accelerator program as my pseudo MBA. And that was also a bit of a failure story. So in 2021, I had co-founded an AI startup called Aggregate Intellect. We worked on it for years. We were building a SaaS knowledge management platform. It also had a large community component, ran a lot of events and open source projects there. We raised a little less than $500,000, and at our peak, we were a team of 12. We got into an accelerator program that was prestigious called the Creative Destruction Lab Accelerator, but it is no equity and no money. So they don't give you funding. It's really mentorship based. And while we were one of 7 companies to graduate from that program in 2023, we were severely disrupted by ChatGPT coming out in November 2022.
Yeah.
Even with the 2 kind of intense design sprints that we did to try to pivot, we weren't able to prove enough traction to raise more money that we needed to keep going. We had a very high burn rate with 12 people. And our growth metrics just weren't interesting enough to investors. So we ended up letting the team go. We switched to a consulting model. I left and moved to an advisory role. So we failed at being a sustainable and scalable business, but the experience was still amazing overall. And I look at it as my MBA equivalent. And I met so many
Yes.
great people through it too.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Thanks for sharing that because there's so much to learn out of that. Thanks. It's hard to believe, but we are already at the time for the questions from the participant, for the people who are with us. And so I want to make sure we're going to go to look at those questions. They've been piling up throughout the entire time y'all have been talking, but this has been fantastic. This was a great conversation. I wish we could keep going, but I want to make sure that we get the questions from the people who are here. So if we take a look at our Easy Retro board, I see one that is just popping up with all the thumbs up is this question up here of how can I get employers to give me an opportunity despite lacking the required experience? I think that's a great question. Does anyone want to jump in on that one?
I can take a go on that. So I think and we talked about this a little bit before, but this is where networking can become very, very helpful. In my experience, if you can get into if you're interested in a big company or a very competitive company, if you can get in through an internship or a postgraduate opportunity, it will always be easier than trying to go through the front door through the normal rounds of interviews. And that's really great because if you're not maybe with like the full stack of expected skills, that's okay, because if you are smart and work hard and you get that opportunity, you can prove your value to them through the internship. Whereas sometimes it's a little bit harder to even get the opportunity to interview if you're trying to go through the front door and you don't know somebody who's there. So I think look for internships, look for career fairs where they have representatives for those companies that you're interested in there. I think in my past, I've also had some good success with sending an email and sort of explaining, like having a good cover letter, kind of a document that explains some of the projects you've been on, the skills you've developed, especially if you don't have an obvious indicator on your resume, like I don't know, a publication or a portfolio on GitHub or a conference presentation you can point to. It's very easy to still explain the skills that you have and the projects you've been on through that kind of a document, and sending that in an email. That's worked for me in the past too, reaching out on LinkedIn. Any way you can, and don't feel ashamed and don't be sorry. This is how we get jobs. Go after what you want. Just be prepared for how you want to present yourself when you get that opportunity.
Yeah, that's great, Tiffany. Thank you for that. And I think it kind of goes along with this question I see here. I'm moving over to the answer of how to make my resume more appealing. And there's actually two questions in this. I think we're going to start there. Uh, I love what Tiffany just said about having a project. Does anyone else on the panel have a suggestion on making that resume appealing to a hiring manager?
I can jump in. I think a lot of the times some of these companies are looking for certain keywords in your resume. So really go through the job description and see which of those keywords are kind of most jumping out at you, and make sure to include those specific words somewhere in your resume, especially if it goes through some kind of parser before it even gets to a human. And then definitely what Tiffany said, use LinkedIn to your advantage, find out who the hiring managers are, reach out to them cold, send a message, try to get their email. And then especially if you're applying for bigger companies, you can do some of those companies' certifications. Google has a lot, NVIDIA has some, AWS has a bunch as well. If you're interested in those companies, definitely do their, branded certifications. And then if you're applying for some of the bigger companies, try to go through a referral. And if you don't know anyone in there, look through your school network and see if anybody that has gone to school, even if they're 20 years older, works at those companies, and reach out cold, say, I'm a fellow, whatever you are, say that what you're applying for. And a lot of those times, the people that work at those companies can put you through the referral network, which is a separate portal than just applying cold.
And I want to add in there, this is a great use of generative AI also to help you with your resume, to have it look at the job description and your resume that you've created and see where there are overlaps, and help you with making sure that it is targeted to that specific job. Great. Let's see what other ones have we got. Lots of here about this one here. Are there any online courses or certifications that would recommend? I think that Miriam just gave a whole bunch of examples right there. Is Sean or Tiffany, do you have any other suggestions about courses or certifications other than the ones that Miriam just shared?
Well, if there are certainly other opportunities through, let's say, Coursera or EDX. I think Stanford has a platform where you can take either specific courses or even some kind of certificate program. So certainly that can't hurt, in addition to what your own degree or curriculum might look like. And yeah, I agree. Whenever you apply to a job, your resume should be tailored to that position or that position description. And any experience you have on your resume, it should all be able to reflect on, how does this experience help me for this particular job application?
Nice. How about this question here? It says, I'm graduating this semester. I do not have any internship so far. It makes me very nervous. What advice would you give me while landing a full-time job? Wherever I'm majoring in information systems and with a concentration in business analytics, does that fall under data science? Someone want to jump in there?
The one thing I can say, if if you don't if you're not able to make any headway with an internship, there are other opportunities such as engaging with, let's say, the open source community. But also, I think there is an organization called Code for America, and some other organizations that are similar to it, where you basically can engage with your local municipality or government and help them solve their technical problems. So be it maybe business improvement or improving IT processes or actually writing a model or writing some code to solve a problem. Those could definitely be opportunities that actually make you stand out, even if you can't find an internship.
I agree with that. And I'd say building on that, look for meetups, which are also free. And a lot of the time they're sponsored by a company that you probably want to work for. So there will be people that work there at those events, and talk to everyone and ask all of your questions. And just the more that they've heard your name is easier when you follow up with an email, when you're sending them more information. I've done that a lot, and that helped me in the past. And plus it's full of really interesting people usually. So there's no harm, no foul there.
Nice. Okay, let's see what else. Let's do this one here. What does a typical day in the life look like for you? Can you give us just a brief, if there is even such thing as a typical day? That's one of the challenges, I think.
So over the years, it's definitely changed for me. It used to be very hands on keyboard, or even being in meetings to um, go over requirements that are then converted into features of an application. But over time, for me, I'm more into doing research, definitely interacting with leadership of the R&D division I'm supporting, and lots of reading. Reading on the latest trends. Since I'm in cybersecurity, reading up on the latest vulnerabilities and what we can do about mitigating those vulnerabilities, and then also reading about what can I do about building better security culture and awareness, and building that into the each phases of the design lifecycle or software design lifecycle. So lots of reading, lots of research, lots of reflecting, and lots of just collaborating, engaging with people.
Nice. Anyone else want to add about their day?
Yeah, I can echo. It's definitely a lot of reading and collaboration. We are running events, and then we work with companies to help them figure out their product marketing strategy and go-to-market strategy. So talking with the clients, there's a new business element of it, and then really kind of setting up the systems to make a business run more sustainably without kind of human intervention. But yeah, every day is different, depends on the different projects on deck and different meetings I said yes to.
Yes, meetings, right? Meetings.
Like I said, mine is also very similar. I start every day with a meeting, a brief, what we call stand up.
Stand up.
Go over our goals, making sure nobody's stuck on anything, seeing if anybody needs help. I try to schedule I'll expand it out my weeks such that I have at least 2 days where I don't have more than one meeting on a day, so I can actually get work done. And the only other thing that I would say I would add to my day that wasn't covered, is I do spend a significant amount of time looking at other people's code. So we usually have a system where someone has to write code, and at least two people have to verify that the thing that they added or changed or submitted makes sense and looks good, which that is a fun exercise to get used to doing if you're not used to looking at other people's code. No matter how much you criticize your own, looking at someone else's is a whole new game.
Yeah. Oh yeah, thanks for sharing that, Tiffany. Okay, let's look at this question here. And I have an answer for it, and then I want to hear what the panelists have to say is which industries have the greatest need for data scientists? I think everyone has needs for data scientists because data, we are collecting so much data, and every day we are getting more and more opportunities for being able to collect even more data. And so if there is a field or industry that you are interested in being in, then most likely there is data involved in it. But I'll turn it over to the panel. Do you all have a different idea or another thought here?
I'll go first. Sorry, guys, I jumped the gun. I would say my biggest personal area where I would say the greatest need is probably around the environment, climate change, and responsible use of materials. So if you've heard of PFAS, which are very scary if you haven't, essentially forever chemicals that can never be converted, recycled, or reused to something else, and they're in everything now. So I think using data just to have better knowledge about what we're making, how we're making it, and what that means for not just us, but the next generation of us is really important to me right now.
Thanks, Tiffany. Anyone else have something that they want to highlight there?
Yeah, it's such a broad question, but I'd say any like X tech would have an opportunity to use data science in it. So med tech, agri tech for the agriculture side, healthcare tech, anything that ends in tech is probably a good place to look into.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, we have a whole bunch of questions about applying for jobs. And so we can look at questions like what's the best way to apply for a job? Is it worth it to mass apply? Or is it better to, really focus or have a referral? What are your thoughts? You can share advice about that, about applying.
I think in the end, use every means necessary to land an interview, get through various stages of the interview process and ultimately land a job. Now, it might be more advantageous if you're more strategic with some positions over others. So it just depends. Some positions are probably, with big companies, they're very prestigious. And so you really want to be strategic around how you're going to apply to that position, where you really want a resume that speaks to the position requirements, and you want to do everything possible to increase your chances of getting that job. But sometimes it's just getting through that first step as well, right? Like, what can I do to talk to a real human person, right? A real human being, and there comes a point where you just have to play the law of numbers and apply to a lot of positions.
This is where I think large language models are your friend. So there's a 99% chance that whatever company you're applying at is also using a large language model to sort and choose and rank applicants. So use the tool that they're using. Ask it, like what was mentioned before by Sarah, take the job description, take your resume, upload it, ask it to rewrite your resume to that job description, ask it to improve the language to match keywords. And then don't, I would not recommend just submitting one common resume to everyone. I would really do that process for everywhere you apply, and apply to lots of places. Be aware that some places like Google, for example, only let you apply to certain roles, I think like twice every 6 months or something like that. And if you get an interview, you have to wait a year after that to re-interview for that same position. So keep that in mind. But I say be focused, be purposeful with it, use the tools that the companies are using, and apply to multiple places, because you just really never know when it's going to hit or why it's going to hit or why it might not hit, and just increase your odds by putting yourself out there. And also know that it's not easy for any of us. All of us have those dry spots. All of us have unexpected easy things that go through, and really hard things too. So you're not alone. It is hard, and just keep going.
And again, that's where your network and your mentor and can help support you during a difficult time of looking for jobs for sure. Miriam, I didn't mean to cut you off if you were going to add something in there.
Oh no, I was going to agree with everything the panelists said. Large language models are your friend. There are even, these kind of agent GPTs on ChatGPT that you can play around with to rewrite the resumes or the cover letters. You can import the different company websites or just the description of what they're working on. So yeah, I don't think the mass applying really works. I have done the easy apply on LinkedIn in the past. If it's easy, you might as well. But if you can try to focus more on getting the right referrals and getting to the right hiring managers, and if you ever feel like you're hitting your head against the wall and applying for everything and nothing is coming up, maybe repurpose that 20% of your time goes into building some other skill. Maybe that's a certification or working on a project just to make yourself more competitive.
Yeah, nice. Here's another question with a couple of upvotes here. Advice on how to develop your tech stack while working full time. Sean, you had talked a little bit about the challenges of when you had tried to go back to school and were working. What kind of advice do you all have about developing those skills that are needed to be a data professional?
I think if you're working full time and you're still wanting to upskill, or you're wanting to pursue higher education, you definitely have to be intentional. And if you're the kind of person that needs to plan things out, add some time on your calendar for upskilling. 1 or 2 hours, 1 or 2 hours monthly, maybe every week, if you can afford that. And I think that's going to be very beneficial. Um, what helped me was also podcasts and just reading articles here and there, which then actually prompted me to even buy books and read books. So it just depends on where your curiosity is going to take you, but you definitely have to be intentional about making time to upskill and just acquiring that knowledge.
Well, panel, Miriam, Sean, Tiffany, this was fantastic. You've done such a lovely job sharing your experiences. You've given great advice. I think the theme of tonight is definitely finding your network, using your network, and letting it help you get to the place that you want to be. It is 6 o'clock, and I'm going to turn it over to Amanda, but a round of applause for our panelists. Thank you so very, very much for being here tonight. Amanda, it's all you.
Awesome. Thank you guys so much. This was amazing. I think now you probably understand why this is one of my favorite nights of the year. It's just inspiring to hear from folks who are working in such compelling fields and who are pivoting and who are, just continuing to be their authentic selves in this really dynamic job market that we're in right now. So, thanks you guys for being here. Thanks for dialing in from your digital nomad site there in Mexico, Miriam. Really appreciate you doing that. Folks, we're just going to take 1 minute to take a look at the upcoming um, uh, workshops and seminars and learning opportunities that we're offering through NCDS. Just going to zip through these relatively quickly. Amy Hemmeter is one of my favorite instructors who I found from Dr. Sarah Egan Warren. She has been leading our Foundations of AI courses. So I encourage you to take a minute and check out this workshop that will last for about 4 hours on Thursday, February 20th. Intro to AI and Deep Learning. That does require some prerequisite. It does require some prerequisite knowledge. So just make sure you take a peek at that before signing up. And let's see what we've got for our next event on here. I'm going to ask my colleague to hit the next button.
I think that is the other one. That's it. She's doing
I'm
two
sorry.
classes. Yeah.
Thank you. Yes, I know how to read, guys. I do. I promise. Thank you. Um, that's what that header's for, isn't it? Intro to Generative AI for Coders. I might have looked at these about 5,000 times already, so forgive me if they do sort of blend together. This event's going to be taking place on Thursday, March 20th. It's another 4-hour workshop with Amy, and she really is a fantastic instructor who works with the Institute for Advanced Analytics at NC State at least once a year. So we are really excited that she's able to work with us as well. So with that in mind, folks, I really appreciate all of you for showing up and for asking such great questions. Get out there and do it. Don't be scared. You've got what it takes to be amazing in this space, and it just, takes some courage every single day. So thank you for being here.